I've had this thing for quite a while and I've used it in a number of videos, but I've never actually done the full review. I thought I had. It's easy to get confused sometimes with all the stuff that I've tested and reviewed or not. But unfortunately, I realized that too late. This was retired in March 2020. A moment of silence for the spit. Well, better late than never, I guess. You might still be able to find this on the used market, and either way, it tells you something about the quality of zombie tools in general. So yeah, let's do it. So the spit is inspired by the Zulu Ikloa spear, which is a very short spear to be used alongside a shield. It's got the usual zombie tools construction. So you have a full tang running all the way through, and then you have handle scales made of steel as well. And it's wrapped in a long strip of black leather. Zombie tool stuff is generally pretty much indestructible. They are made of 5160 spring steel, which is extremely strong, durable steel that you can throw all kinds of abuse at and it'll just keep coming back for more. These are no exception. This is a very interesting design because of the format overall. Extremely long handle. The handle is basically about as long as the blade. And so you can use this with two hands, either like this, or with the hands spread apart for more control, or you can choke down and get a lot more power out of it. This is what I like to do because this way it feels a bit more like a longsword, and that way you can generate the most power. This is really more for precise cuts and of course thrusts as well. And this is a rare case where I've actually during the testing skipped the abusive stuff. I guess that's my way of making up for a certain incident that happened with another zombie tool sword where I grossly underestimated the power of 7.62 by 39. People still keep reminding me of that every now and then. It's been 6 years. 6 years! You gotta let it go, folks. I will certainly never forget that day of shame. So yeah, I haven't done any abusive testing with this, let alone something insane as that, because I really don't feel the need to. With this kind of construction and this steel and the thickness of the steel, this is a chunky piece of 5160. Outside of going completely apeshit with firearms and such, there's just no way you're gonna break this. I don't see this ever breaking. I mean, edge damage in and of itself is hard enough to do, but just it would take a lot to break this. I mean, okay, if you put it in a vise and just pull on it like a gorilla, with all that leverage of that length, you would be able to snap it, most likely, but it would take a lot. So it's just not necessary, in my opinion. And the tests on the zombie head are still something that would make a lesser blade, if you will, fail. If there were any flaws in the construction, if it was weak in any way, hard strikes on one of those zombie heads would definitely make things loosen up or break something. So there's still a lot of force involved. I think this still counts as like half an abusive test. Not exactly abusive because use on a zombie head, literally what this is for. And swinging this with both hands close to the end of the handle, with all the leverage that you get, it is extremely powerful. It cracks a zombie head right open. There were some pretty interesting cuts with it, particularly when I turned the zombie into Pac-Man. This beast here will wreck things, and it doesn't even take a whole lot of effort. So then I went on to a ballistic gel dummy, testing thrusts, and it works very well. As you can imagine, as something that is inspired by a short spear, of course, it is very effective in the thrust. And yeah, I mean, there's really not much to add here. You see how well it works. It's not called the spit for nothing. It could also be the impaler or something like that. Either way, this thing is very effective, no doubt about it. So it chops and cleaves well, it stabs well. How's the edge, and how does it do in a hewing cut against tatami, where you need a certain amount of precision and a nice sharp edge? Well, take a look. I honestly didn't expect that it would cut tatami this cleanly. I mean, it is quite a wide blade, which generally helps with cutting, and it's got a good angle on it, nice sharp edge, but even so, it did better than I would have guessed. I was able to do some really nice, clean cuts with it, and it's fun to use too. So there are a lot of things to like about it. Let's talk about the design as well before I get to the handling. Very appropriate for that apocalyptic setting. I've always liked the finish on these. You know, this kind of very, it looks like you've left it outside for a while. It looks all weathered in a good way. This is a bit of a double-edged sword, the finish, because on the one hand, if you get any marks on it or any gunk or even a bit of rust, and it is resistant against rust because of the finish, by the way, but I did get some gunk on there that's pretty hard to remove, and I was hesitant to really scrub it too much. I've been trying to figure out if it has faded a little bit after a cleaning that I did, and I can't quite say. It might have faded a little bit, but I can't really tell for sure. Either way, I'm a little bit cautious. There's one spot here I can see where it has rubbed off a little bit. So the good thing about it is if you do get any kind of blemishes on it, it kind of blends right in. You know, there are some areas here, like you can tell, but it doesn't stand out as much. You know, if this was like a satin finish blade or even a mirror polish, that would really stand out in a very ugly way. This here, it just kind of adds to it. You know, any other blemishes, any other marks, it just goes with the theme. So that's the good thing about it. All right, onto the handling. It has pros and cons, and this is the only area where I have something negative to say. It is definitely heavier than it needs to be for the size, simply because the handle scales are steel as well. You know, any kind of design like this, you know, if you compare this to a short spear, it's already heavier because it has a full steel tang, whereas a spear could just have a shorter tang and then just a wooden handle or haft. In this case, you add quite a bit of weight here with the metal scales. And so there are pros and cons about it. On the one hand, it again fits the apocalyptic design very well because there's literally nothing that can go wrong with this. You know, if you have especially a wooden haft, it can break and it will have to be replaced over time. If you have wooden handle scales and a full tang, not that big of a deal. They could potentially crack, but it's not particularly likely. This, you could probably literally drive over with a tank and it will be fine. So that's great, but it does add quite a bit more. Now the overall weight isn't terribly high, but for the length, if you compare it to a lot of other swords or short spears, it is pretty clunky. Where you really notice that is when using this with one hand. Why would you want to? Well, maybe to pair it with a nice anti-zombie shield. This is actually a buckler from the 15th century fighting manuscript written by Hans Talhofer, but this really looks like it would fit right in a zombie apocalypse, don't you think? So if you wanted to use this together and, you know, thrust with that and use this to be able to push them away or strike with it or, you know, knock them in the head, anything like that. So yeah, you can absolutely do this, but it is certainly quite a bit heavier than especially a spear of this size, but also a lot of swords. Again, if you just move it around for a bit like this, it's really not a problem. You can be pretty quick with it, and it doesn't seem like a big deal. However, again, going with this zombie apocalypse theme, if you had to keep fighting an entire horde, this would be really tiring, pretty quickly. Even if I just do several consecutive thrusts here, this is, yeah, you feel it. Especially if you want to get more reach and want to grab it further here, which would be fine with a spear. This really wants to dip down because of the weight. So personally, for practical reasons, I would prefer wooden handle scaled, something a bit lighter, just to save a bit on that, especially also considering if you were carrying this, again, very hypothetical, unless 2020 unleashes an actual zombie apocalypse. I wouldn't even be surprised anymore at this point. So just going with the theme of the design, I personally would prefer that, but this is their style. This is how they do it. All the other weapons are like that too. Definitely for backyard cutting or destroying zombie heads, perfectly fine, no issue. It is controllable, that's what really matters. You know, either way, like I can choke down all the way and I can use a controlled longsword style cut and I don't have to totally overcommit or anything like that. So it's really not a big deal. And I think this would be one mean throwing weapon if you wanted to throw away your main weapon in the zombie apocalypse. Probably not the smartest thing to do, but there are definitely upsides to this kind of heft, including just the raw cutting power. And of course, depending on how you use it, the long handle can negate that, because this way you have all kinds of control and you can be very quick with it. It's just, this is not a very powerful cut compared to this. The kydex sheath that it comes with works well. I wish there was some kind of belt attachment. I mean, you could rig something because there are reinforced holes here on the sides. So you could thread paracord through and attach it in various ways, even on your back if you wanted to. Not that you could draw this from the... Maybe you could. Okay, never mind. You could actually. The blade is short enough. But then you have this long ass handle sticking up. This holds onto it really strongly, a bit too much. It's like... I like to pull on both. That makes it a lot easier. But yeah, it fits it, it protects it. What more is there to say? Works. So in short, I like the spit. I like it quite a bit. Sorry, couldn't resist. Anyway, so I wish I had gotten to this earlier, before it was discontinued. But there is the Reaper, which is somewhat similar in that it also has a very long handle. That one is single-edged, but I think it would be somewhat comparable to this. It's longer overall. So if you like this, you might like the Reaper. Either way, I'll leave a link to the website down below. And yeah, that's about it. So I hope you found the review interesting. Thanks for watching and have a good one, folks. I honestly didn't expect that it... Thanks, truck. Appreciate it. It's nice. It's great ambient noise. How could you not love it? I can still hear it. I don't know if you can, but oh boy, that's a big one. Are we done? Are we done? Okay.